Hey everyone, my name is Jace Elliott, state deer biologist with the Iowa Department of Natural Resources. I'm just going to talk about the exciting upcoming hunting seasons that we have, the Gun 1 and Gun 2 deer season in Iowa. We can expect population numbers to look pretty similar to how they did last year. All of our data shows that statewide, deer numbers are stable to slightly increasing. Of course, that could change depending on where exactly you're at in the state, but by and large, there's plenty of harvest opportunities this year, and we've certainly been seeing that with our earlier seasons. Now, the two gun seasons have about 100,000 and usually a little bit more deer hunters that come out in Iowa and participate in these seasons. We see about half of our annual deer harvest occur during these two short seasons, so there's a lot of effort on the landscape and a lot of deer getting harvested. And that means that it's important to be safe when you're out there, make a hunt plan, communicate that hunt plan with your hunting partners, and then stick to that plan. We tend to see more accidents occur during these seasons for hunting related incidents, and most of that comes down to mishandling firearms or a lack of communication with hunters. So just make sure you're doing everything you can to be safe out there and have a safe and successful season. So we do have a few changes this year in terms of our deer season structure. Although for the average Iowa deer hunter, it's business as usual. Keep in mind that if you do plan to partake in the Gun 1 firearm season in Kossuth or Humboldt County, that the buck-only restriction has been lifted, allowing you to harvest any legal deer during those seasons. Now, on the other hand, Woodbury and Crawford County have entered those counties that are restricted to buck-only harvest during the first firearm season in order to allow deer populations in those counties to recover. So there's no major changes to the harvest reporting process. Hunters who harvest a successful buck will see a couple extra questions about main beam length reporting. Besides that, our system is going to stay the same. You have a lot of different options in terms of reporting your harvest. You can call it in by the phone. You can use our Go Outdoors Iowa app. You can register it online through our website, or text to harvest is another option as well. So we know from a recent study that was conducted in-house that shotgun or firearm season harvest does depend on weather conditions. We've found that there's certain weather conditions like snowfall on opening day or generally cooler temperatures that tend to increase harvest that we see in Iowa. On the other hand, rainfall and accumulated snow depth can actually have a negative effect on deer harvest. So we're going to keep our fingers crossed for cool, dry conditions this deer season. So EHD, or epizootic hemorrhagic disease, is a seasonal viral disease that affects deer during the late summer to early fall months. Now, this is kind of a hot topic this year in Iowa because it was one of our more severe years in terms of EHD-related mortality that deer experienced in Iowa. It was our third highest, our third most severe outbreak year, third to 2012 and 2019 in that order. We've received reports of over 1,200 deer in the state that are suspected to have succumbed to this disease. Now, that's not a total count, of course. That number would be much higher, but we use our reported, this reported number as an index compared to an average year of, let's say, 50 or 100. So it really was quite a severe year. Now, the thing about EHD is that it's not 100% fatal like chronic wasting disease would be. Deer do have the ability to survive this disease, although there's probably not a high number of deer that do. Deer in Iowa are fairly naive to this disease. It hasn't been on the landscape as long as it has in other parts of the country, like the northeastern and southeastern regions of the US. So for that reason, deer may be more susceptible to dying from the disease in Iowa, which is why we've seen fairly severe outbreaks when they do occur here in Iowa. The bright side of all of this is that Due to having a pretty strong deer population throughout most of the state, and particularly where the disease was most severe this year, we should expect deer numbers to recover in very short order. We're talking about 2 or 3 years if history has shown us anything. Now, if that's not the case, let's say that we see a sustained, suppressed population due to this disease, then we can take management actions to lower county antlerless quotas to allow deer populations to recover. Now, we've only had to do that in very rare instances because of EHD, simply because deer populations do have the ability to recover fairly quickly. Now, this disease can be very severe and devastating to deer populations at the local or property scale. Perhaps you've, as a landowner, noticed a lot of dead deer near water sources on your property. Now, that may not indicate the situation of the whole county, which is why it doesn't always require management intervention. So, if you're concerned about the deer numbers on your property after this EHD outbreak, then as a landowner and hunter and steward of the resource, it's your responsibility to moderate harvest to the degree that you think is necessary. So our 2 biggest deer-related diseases, EHD and CWD, are certainly impacting the deer herd in different ways. Chronic wasting disease is not an acute disease, it's chronic as the name suggests, so it's occurring in the background, in the shadows, if you will, the whole year. Now, we have a fairly low prevalence rate in the state of Iowa. We're talking about 2% statewide as of last year. Now, this is much lower than other states that surround us that have had the disease for longer. However, we can expect the prevalence rate of chronic wasting disease to continue to increase throughout time, just because that's what we've seen in history, and that's just the way that the disease operates. However, we are actively taking steps to monitor the disease through hunter-submitted samples, and that gives us the information we need to track the disease and see what's happening year to year. We're also managing for the disease by trying to actively lower densities in areas that are overabundant in order to minimize the transmission of the disease in those areas. Now, that certainly doesn't mean that we're trying to wipe deer off the landscape. We'd have no interest in doing that, but rather we're trying to manage the population at the low end of its management goal to still provide ample hunting opportunity, but reduce disease transmission as much as possible. So just as a reminder, we have a lot of opportunity to harvest antlerless deer in Iowa. Check on our county quotas. There's still plenty of tags available if you'd still like to fill the freezer with a little bit more venison. Let's say you're in the situation where you already have all the venison you need, but you'd still like to harvest additional deer. We have a couple great programs in place that can source that venison and donate it to people in need, starting with our online deer exchange program. This is an online dashboard that's set up to connect hunters with people who would like to receive that venison, cutting out the middleman. Of course, there's also the HUSH program, which stands for Help Us Stop Hunger. And this is a program that we run in partnership with a lot of different commercial processors and meat lockers throughout the state, where if you harvest a deer that you'd like to donate, you can find a list of participating lockers on our DNR deer hunting website and get that deer donated through the HUSH program. You know, what we hear from food banks is that high quality protein can be some of the most difficult nutrients to source for people in need. And of course, every deer that's harvested from the Iowa landscape can provide as little as 15 to 20 pounds or as much as well over 60 pounds of fresh, healthy, clean venison that can go to people who need it. Hopefully that helped answer some questions you might have about the firearm seasons that are fast approaching. You know, deer hunting is one of Iowa's greatest traditions, so get outdoors and enjoy it, and have a safe and successful season.